While Green Spot may be one of those classic Irish whiskies, this week I'm shining a spotlight on Yellow Spot. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Matt, I'm a whiskey nerd, and like I said, this week I'm looking at Yellow Spot. So let me get this into the glass and I'll tell you a bit more about it. Now, most people would be familiar with Green Spot. It's one of those classic, kind of quintessential Irish pot still whiskies, and Yellow Spot is essentially just a development of that whiskey. Like Green Spot is a single pot still whiskey. Single pot still is the style of whiskey that's unique to Ireland. It means they use malted and unmalted barley in the distillation process. That's going to give you a bit more kind of green, fresh notes, a bit more floral, fruity notes, and it's going to give you an overall more complex whiskey. And like Green Spot, it uses bourbon and sherry casks in the aging. But that's where the similarities end, because Yellow Spot also uses Malaga wine casks, and I've read that those Malaga wine casks were filled with Pedro Ximénez sherry wine, which is going to give you a lot more depth, a lot more rich, sweet fruitiness to the whiskey. This is also bottled at 46% and it's 12 years old. So Green Spot is bottled at 40% and it's about 7 to maybe 10 years old, whereas this is going to be a minimum of 12 years old. So you're going to get a bit more punch, you're going to get more kind of barrel influence from the three casks, you're going to get more weight behind it because of the higher ABV, and you're going to get maybe more complex development because it spent longer in the casks. But does complexity mean a better whiskey? Let's go for the nose and find out. Right off the bat, I'm getting kind of honey and pepper. So if you can imagine a nice, fresh, kind of sweet honey, but someone's cracked a bunch of black pepper into it, that kind of flavor. I'm also getting kind of like a green tea kind of note that kind of complements those black pepper notes. If you're familiar with a rye, the kind of spiciness of a rye, you know, it's sometimes described as being like a black pepper, like a green tea. It's that kind of nice, fresh, herbal notes in there. And that's all on top of a nice base of vanilla. Like, there's a lot of bourbon cask influence in here. It gives you a nice bit of sweetness, gives you a nice bit of oak, and it's definitely delivering a nice base on top of which all these other flavors can sit. Green Spot is usually defined by the fact that it has really sharp, bright green apple notes in the nose, but this one, they're not really there. I'm getting more of like a kind of a peaches note, like that kind of juiciness of a peach. That's kind of what I'm getting here. Maybe I'm getting a little bit of like red apple flesh, but definitely not those green apple notes that some people really love about Green Spot. So let's go in for the palate and see how it goes. There's the apple. There's the red apple. That's a nice kind of change, because the nose was promising kind of nice spices. It was promising kind of juicy, kind of maybe tropical or stone fruits. And on the palate, you get hit with this nice bit of red apple right up front. There's definitely other sweetness in there though. There's like that nice vanilla sweetness. There's a bit of oak spiciness rounding it out. There's a lot of kind of other depth of flavor going on behind that, on top of which I'm also getting a lot of pot still spices. So I'm going to go in again and see what else I can find. Those pot still spices, they're very apparent. It's going to give you that nice kind of nutmeg, clove, those kind of baking spices, that kind of peppery spiciness. And then that's complemented by some nice oak. Because there were 3 casks used in this, you're going to get 3 different levels of oak influence. So you're going to get a little bit of dryness in there, you're going to get a little bit of that nice kind of oak char, the kind of like the barrel tannins coming through. And that's going to sit on top of that vanilla note. It's actually quite reminiscent of like a creme brulee, because you've got that charred oak, you've got that kind of charred note, but you've also got that vanilla sweetness, that kind of custardy vanilla sweetness, and they combine into giving you like that creme brulee note, where you've got the custard below and you've got that charred sugar on top. And that kind of honey I was getting on the nose, it delivers itself more of like a mouthfeel. Now, pot still whiskies, they're typically going to be a bit oilier, a bit fuller, a bit denser, so they're going to give you a much more noticeable mouthfeel, and that honey note definitely comes through. It's thicker, it's nice, it's rich, and it's very mouth coating. Overall though, all those spices, all those kind of sharper notes, they're all moderated by a really nice level of sweetness. So let's go in for the finish and we'll see how those flavors develop as it fades. As it fades, the kind of oak char, the oak spice, it becomes quite apparent, and then it fades off. It leaves you with those pot still spices, that kind of pepperiness. It leaves you with some kind of fruitiness. Like, they suggest that you get kind of grape notes on it. I'm not sure I get grape notes. Like, I can see probably where you get those grape notes, but for me it's more akin to like the skin of a red apple, which does kind of taste similar to the skin of a red grape, but for me it's more of that red apple skin, like not the flesh, more the skin, where it's a little bit tart but also kind of nice and round and sweet. And I am getting that bit of barley coming through. I mean, it does use malted and unmalted barley, so you would expect to have some barley flavour coming through. And it kind of, if you've ever drunk like a barley water or those kind of sweet drinks with barley in them, like it's that kind of note. It's nice, it's sweet. Overall, this is just a very, very nice sweet whiskey. That said though, it is also a bit more complex than Green Spot. So Green Spot, it's a bit younger, it's lower ABV, and it uses less casks in its maturation, so it's going to be a little bit less complex. If you've watched the video, which I'll put a link to up there, where I have Rose taste some kind of expensive whiskies and some more reasonably priced whiskies, you'll know that sometimes complexity doesn't mean a better whiskey, especially for new drinkers. Because if you're not used to that spiciness of a pot still whiskey, if you're not used to that kind of sharper note you get from the oaks from using 3 different casks, this might not be to your liking. Now, don't take that to mean I think this is a bad whiskey. I think this is definitely a step up from Green Spot. I like it more, there's a bit more weight, there's a bit more complexity, there's a bit more development in this whiskey than in the Green Spot. Green Spot, it's a great whiskey, it's just that little bit more basic compared to this. But if you're new to Irish whiskies, if you're new to pot still whiskies, I probably wouldn't recommend Yellow Spot to start off with. I'd say go in for the Green Spot. It's a lower ABV, it's a bit less complex, it's a bit younger, so you get the kind of flavors of the whiskey without being overwhelmed by having too many different competing flavors. Because sometimes if you're a new drinker, you don't want to have so many different flavors in a whiskey. You want to have maybe 3 or 4 different flavors. You can find them, you can unpack them, you can get used to them, and then later as your palate develops, you can go in for more and more complex whiskies. So if you're at that stage, I think Yellow Spot is definitely one for you to try out, because it has more complexity, it has more weight, it has a bit more body behind it, it's a bit firmer, and it's definitely a very nice whiskey. Interestingly, Yellow Spot is actually priced at the same price point as Blue Spot. Blue Spot is the kind of recently released cask strength version of Green Spot that also uses a bit more complexity, has a different kind of wine cask in its maturation. Blue Spot was only released about a year ago and it is still hard to find. Like, this is €80, Blue Spot is also €80, but I've seen Blue Spot on sale at secondary retail market prices of about €250 because it's just so hard to find. So Yellow Spot against Blue Spot, I do think Blue Spot is a bit better. I think because I really like a cask strength whiskey. If you know me, you know I love a cask strength whiskey, but I definitely do think that Yellow Spot is a step up from Green Spot. So if you're used to Irish whiskies, if you've had the Redbreast, if you've had the Green Spot, maybe try Yellow Spot next. And what do you think? Have you tried Blue Spot? Have you tried Red Spot? Have you tried Yellow or Green Spot? Or have you even tried the different versions of Green Spot that exist, where they collaborated with different vineyards to add some different kind of wine cask influence to Green Spot? Let me know in the comments below what you think your favorite spot whiskey is. But for now, I think this is where I'll leave this review. I put out new reviews every Wednesday and cocktail recipes every Friday, so subscribe and you'll see them all. And until next time, Sláinte.